Hey, what's up, guys? This is the beginning of my first Patreon tutorial. I just want to say thanks for everyone that's supporting my Patreon, and hopefully we both go on this cool journey and learn some really neat stuff. And I'll be sharing what I know and hopefully learning some new things as we go along. And I look forward to seeing anything you guys make with some of the stuff you learn from here. So this first video is going to be covering tree shading and basically plant foliage asset shading and Houdini. And technically, since the shading system for Redshift is basically the same in all apps, anything you learn here will be applicable in Maya or Max or whatever. They share the same nodes basically. And so the first step though is we're going to actually look at how do we export a tree. So I'm going to be using speed tree assets that I made, and so we're gonna go straight from the beginning because some people don't even know how to export some trees. You could use your own trees that you get online that you bought through Xfrog or whatever, the sold models that are out there. But if you're using SpeedTree like I am, this is the process that you would go to export. If you buy the models and stuff, they're already ready to go, so you don't even have to worry about this stage. And so we got this model here of this cool rainbow gum tree. And so now that we've got it loaded into SpeedTree, you could tweak it yourself. So if you want to add changes to the trunk and stuff, I'm not going to go into how you actually have to do this. This would be a whole different class into itself. But you could basically it's a node-based system, just like any other node-based system. So if you zoom in here, you got the tree, the trunk, the level one the branches and stuff, the twigs, reeds, etc., and you work your way up to the leaves. And so each one of these nodes brings up this system of the way it's generated. So you could add orientation, gravity effects, gnarl, things like that to like bend the tree. So if I turn on curl, say, and I bend it, it obviously bends a tree. So, but we're going to use a straight tree for our purposes. And so, like I said, again, I'll probably cover a more in-depth speed tree tutorial some other day, but for now, we're just looking at how to export. And so, all you got to do is basically you have your tree, it's ready to go, and you just go to File, you go under Export Mesh, and so then you go to wherever you're going to save it. So for me, I'm saving it on my NAS box where I keep all my assets that I save out and stuff. And so we're gonna always label everything. This is just good practice. Easier to find your assets once you build up a library. So this is the rainbow gum tree. And for the format you save it in, there's a couple options. FBX, basically when you save FBX, it saves out each individual chunk, like so it'll save out the leaves, the twigs, and the main trunk separately. If you want to do certain little changes and stuff like that. Personally, there's also Lembic. I personally just go with something universal. So OBJ. The reason I go with OBJ is just because if I want to load this up into any other program, this generally OBJ is universal. It'll work regardless. FBX can sometimes get funky in different apps. It works great in Autodesk apps. So if you're using Maya and stuff like that, but I just prefer OBJ just for the universality of it, that I'll be able to reuse this exported mesh for whatever, so I could use this in Maya or in Houdini or some other app, and it'll just work. So we'll save it out, rainbow gum medium.obj, click save, give it a second to cook, and once it's cooking, it's going to give you your texture output information. So like the format you're outputting as, there we go, the way it's grouped, stuff like that. And so generally, you want to just stick to material. That way, each group will be by the material. So the leaves will be grouped, the trunk will be grouped separately as a texture, the branches will be grouped separately. And for the coordinate system, Y up is generally what's used in Houdini and Maya. I believe in video game apps, Y isn't up, it's Z, but I'm not 100% sure. But the Y axis up and down gets changed. For what you're grouping as, you want to group the branches, the tree caps, which is basically the ends of points, the fronds, the leaves, facing and non-facing. You don't need forces and zones. This is if you're going to be doing animation stuff, and we're not going that far. And you want to copy the textures, and you want separate alphas. And the reason you want separate alphas is because of the way Redshift uses the sprite shader. So make sure this is turned on. You don't need to invert. You don't need to invert the normals, and you can pick your texture format. So there's different formats. EXR obviously being the best, high quality, 32-bit, all that stuff. But it's bigger, eats up more VRAM in Redshift. You probably, these assets are going to be pretty far away. They're not. This tree is actually particularly a medium quality one. It's not a high quality one. So JPEG will probably be fine, or PNG. And I'm just going to go with JPEG. But keep that in mind that you could choose different formats for whatever your purposes are. And so we just hit OK. Let that do its thing. And once that's finished cooking, I'll make sure that it's all there. So let's go to, yep, and all the assets are there. So if we check out the icons bigger, yep, everything's there. Cool. So now that we've got all our textures and stuff made, let's move on to Houdini. So I'll show you how to import this in, how to start building the shaders, and get going on that side. All right, guys. We're in Houdini now, and I've got a couple tree assets already in here that I'll be shading. I'll be importing the tree we just made in Speed Tree, and I got a couple other trees that are actually only displaying as bounding boxes, and a few of them hidden. And the only reason I'm doing that is just because these trees can get kind of heavy, as you can see. And so having a lot of these, while you're working can slow down the look dev process and the viewport. So for now, let's just keep some of these things hidden. And we'll be looking at what we're working with here. So, but if you, just to give you an example of what's going on right now, if I open up the Redshift IPR, let that pop up. And I think Houdini's stalling. Oh, there we go. Okay. And let Redshift load up our scene real quick. Let me check actually how many GPUs I got. I'm not sure if I have them all turned on. Okay, I still got my main GPU free, so that way we could work and record a little better. And so let's keep this loaded up on top of everything. Where's that at? Always on top. Okay, and let's actually look through the camera. So camera 1, let's lock that. And so right now there's no shader, obviously, on these trees. As you can see, they're completely white. And let's check out these other trees back here that are bounding boxes right now. I'll show you how to do that too, to keep your viewport light. And actually, let's check out, I'm not sure what resolution I'm on. I might be a little too high right now since it's taking a little longer to update. Where's the camera? Yeah, let's actually decrease this to 720p, just something low res, so we get some good response. And let's drop our adaptive error, or increase our adaptive error threshold, I should say, to 0.01. This will speed everything up. Right now I had it on final render kind of settings, and so basically we've got these other trees that I started shading, and let's zoom out. There's actually several of these, and so they're just hidden right now. So if I turn these on, and obviously this is going to be a heavy scene because there's so many of these, and they're real geometry. They're not proxies yet. They're not, it's the full deal. So let's refresh the IPR. Let it cook the objects for a second. Probably should have done this earlier and turned on all the objects so it would have cooked the transforms. But, well, you're seeing this happen live. So if I make mistakes, that's because I'm making them. So we'll figure it out together as we go. And let that load. And so yeah, these loaded the full geometry, and I'll show you how to convert these to bounding boxes. So here we go. We've got a couple pretty dense trees. If we zoom in here, these are not light by any means. But the idea is that we're gonna shade these up and eventually turn these into proxies, so you could scatter tons of these, and Redshift will just render it out. So if we zoom in here, we've got tons of little geometry, tons of leaves, and this is all cut out, and there's translucency and all that stuff going on. And so for now, I'm going to just keep these as bounding boxes, and I'll actually end up hiding them. So for people that aren't familiar with Houdini, I'll kind of go through this process a little bit. So let's pause that IPR for a bit and get that out of the way. So let's turn these into bounding boxes just to make our viewport lighter. We know what they are when we're previewing, and also by the name and stuff, and we'll deal with it that way. So let's select this tree, and that would be our weeping Euro beech trees. And so there's a couple variations. So when you select your object, either in the viewport or up here, you'll have the options for the object right here. And so you can changing the display under render. You can change it from full geometry to a point cloud, which is a little lighter, or you can use bounding boxes or completely hidden. We're going to go with bounding box, so let's just turn all of these into bounding boxes, keep our viewport as light as possible, and that way we only actually have one displayed at a time. And so it just keeps things lighter, and we'll actually hide all of these from rendering period. That way we could just look dev in the IPR a lot faster. And so, not hidden, bounding box. Okay, cool. So now that we've got all these, let's actually hide all of them. And so, okay, for people, I'm using Houdini 16, and for people that don't know, if you select several objects, you roll over, you have the context little wheel thing that pops up. In the older versions, you had to actually click on the flags on the node, but so you could just click this on, off, as you can see. So, okay, cool. And just so you know, for the environment, all there is a directional light for basically my sun to give us nice harder shadows, and an HDR dome light of a pretty neutral hazy day. And just the reason why you want to use something like that is if you're using something in direct light, like a bright sunny beach HDR, it can be hard to actually look dev the object properly because it's being in the colors and stuff like that is being influenced heavily by the HDR. So you want to use a neutral kind of skylight. That's the same reason why if you're out taking photography of textures and stuff, you want to keep basically your photos taken in a nice hazy kind of day because you don't have the strong value shifts between the darks and the lights, the shadows. It's just kind of a diffuse color. And so you want to do that. And our only, what's casting the hard shadows is actually our sun, our directional light. And so the fill light is just the gray dome light we got going on. Okay, so we're going to import the tree we made now. These are the 3 trees that need to get shaded. And so we're going to import our tree. And so let's zoom in here. I like to be organized. You don't have to do all this, but you know, being organized in a scene like this where you're building a library of assets, it's usually a good idea to do this. And so these are my speed tree assets. So let's bring this down a little bit. And to make one of these, if you don't know, you click up here. It's a create network box, and it's next to the sticky notes. And this just lets you build a little box so you can drag everything together and put a label on it. It's just for organization purposes. And so first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a file node. So right click, hit tab, just like Nuke, just like other apps where you're building the nodes. And if you don't know the node you're looking for, obviously you could right click and scroll through here and check all the nodes out, and you can pick whatever's necessary. So we're importing something, so we're going to use the file node. And we're going to name this the rainbow tree. And so now we're going to double click this and go into the SOP context. And we got this little file node. And so right here, now that you've got it selected, you can go to the geometry file and you can load it up. And so you hit that, and we're going to go to my NAS box. And so let me, it's just probably faster for me to just copy the location and paste it in. And so now we've got the rainbow gum tree medium OBJ. And we're going to just double click that. It's going to take a second to load, and here it is. And it's massive. But we'll deal with that in a bit. And actually, let me rename this to rainbow gum, just to be more specific on the type of tree this is. And so let's zoom in here, and we're going to just make a transform node just to put it somewhere else. So let's flag it now. So we're on this node, on the transform node now, and let's shrink it down. Something a little more appropriate. Oh no. And yeah, that's still way too big. Let's go a little bit smaller than that. Maybe something like that's cool. Yeah, 0.2. Let's do that. And let's change the location. So let's see, move it a little this way. Move it over here. And yeah, that's cool. Okay, so now that we've got that, we've put it into a location we want. We have to add we have to open it up to add materials. So right click, type in material, and you drop down this little material node, wire it up, move the flag onto this node now. And so now that we've got this node here, because the way we exported this object originally, the materials are already grouped. So basically what happens is now all we have to do is activate them in here. And so if you click on group, you'll see the list of the groups. So there's branches 1, branches 10 or whatever, cap, the rainbow gum bark, and the rainbow gum leaf. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 materials we need. So we hit 5 right here, and it builds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So each one of these, we assign it to one of these materials. So let's go through and assign each one of these. And now we just have to build the shaders, and we'll be linking them here. So now we should go into material context. So let's pop up material context, and I have another series of the materials for the other trees that I built already, and for the ground. Oh, and actually, one thing I forgot to do, I should make the ground a lot more diffuse. I believe it's not diffuse at all. So let's turn down reflection. And the reason I'm doing that is because the ground right now is shiny and it's bouncing light back up onto the trees, and that can actually influence the look, and we don't want that to happen. So we don't want to turn it off completely, and let's actually give it an earthier color, something that would be more like a ground. So let's do this kind of green, and that'll be cool. Let's actually check out what it looks like right now. So let's fire up the IPR. And and another thing, actually, I totally forgot. In OBJ context, let's go inside the rainbow gum. And what we want to do is, now that we loaded the file in, this is going to be a master file, so we don't want to continuously be loading the geometry from my network storage, because this takes time. It's got to cook further down the chain. So what we're going to do is we're just going to freeze and lock the loading. And so what this does is it basically bakes the geometry into your file. It makes your file size larger, but now we're not actually loading the geometry from this place, the location on the network drive. It's part of the file now, built in basically. And now we're only going to have to cook the transform and the material. And once we're done completely shading and everything, we can just freeze at the material level, and it'll just load when you first open up the scene from this point on without having to cook everything else. And so, all right, now we're going to get back. Oh, and to swap in and out of menus, if let's say you're at object level, the base object level, and you click on an object and you're in the object, you could hit U, pulls you out. And that's just something, once you learn the hotkeys and stuff, it helps out. And where were we? Oh, okay, we're checking out the scene. The matte, let's actually change the ground. That's a little too green. Let's desaturate it quite a bit. Let's make it a little darker. Not that dark. Something like that. And we could actually tell it to not even influence the objects, but I kind of want it a little bit to have a little influence. So we'll leave the ground like this. And now we'll build a new shader. So we're going to start with the gum tree that we exported. And we're going to build a new sticky, and we'll expand this, and let's label this the rainbow gum tree, and we'll start with the basic Redshift material. And now that Redshift supports the material context, basically you could build your shaders here. But I personally, for organization purposes, I like to build with the Redshift material builder, which is a dedicated node where if you go into it, you can then start building the rest of the shader. And I just think this is a little more organized. It's kind of like the old shop way of doing things instead of the material context, but it's just the way I prefer it. So let's hit tab, Redshift, start typing, and you'll get Redshift material. Oh wait, no, this is, yeah, see, this is the way to do it if you're doing it the new way, where you build the nodes here. But just imagine all of these, it gets sloppy. They'd just be everywhere, and it can turn into a mess. So, but if you only need to build one node, then this isn't that bad, you know. But it could get really messy, and I prefer to do it the other way. And so, go into Redshift. See the Redshift material builder. Let's drop this down, and basically it builds a VOPNet, which lets you then go in to it. But an important thing that you got to keep in mind is you have to flag it. I don't know why it's not on automatic get flagged, but just make sure you go here, turn on material, and it'll turn orange, and that way later on it'll detect it when you connect it to your object. So if we label this the rainbow gum bark, for example, and we actually go to the object level, and we go to our rainbow gum tree, and we go into the material node, you'll see, let's actually go to our bark so we can link it. If right here you have the option to click material, and so if you click on this, open a floating window, you'll open up a window where then you can select. If you know the name, you could just type it in and point it to it, but we're going to do it this way. And so you can go under material now, and you look for your material. And so we just named it the rainbow gum bark. So now if you didn't do that the material flag, it will not show up here. And so you'll be like, what? Where's my material? You know. So make sure you turn that on. Now we select it, and it obviously we haven't added anything to it, so now it's not doing anything yet. Let's zoom in here, and let's hide the other trees to make things a little faster. And so we only have the let's reload the IPR, and so we only have the rainbow tree. And so, okay, cool. And we're gonna just go back into the material, and if I go in here and I put an RS material, the basic, the Uber shader, so you just hit, you know, tab, and it'll pop up as soon as you start typing material, RS material. We'll drop that down, and we'll output the out color into the surface. And so what happens now is it will update the moment I change this color. And so if I start going, I think I got to reload the IPR actually, because I just connected it. Yeah, see, so if I change this to whatever color now, it's going to do what it does. And so now it's live, wired up. And again, like I said, remember, activate it as a material. Otherwise, it won't show up on the list. And so, okay, cool. We finally got a material plugged in. So now we want to get our texture plugged into this. And so we're going to tab, type in RS texture. And in Maya, it would be the file node to read in texture, just like any other render engine. So now that we've got this, let's close this out of the way. It's going to ask you, okay, where is your file location? And so, since we just opened it recently, it saves where we just were, so that's really cool. So let's turn off show sequences, because it's thinking that these are animation frames, because it's numerical order, the way that that SpeedTree exported it. So turn that off, and let's look for bark branches. Rainbow gum normal, rainbow gum bark. Okay, cool. So now it's got the rainbow gum bark, and we're going to do out color into the base properties, diffuse color. So we do that, and let's reload the IPR, and if we zoom in here, now you can see that it's got that rainbow, hence the name, rainbow tree bark. Okay, cool. So our first stage, we just want to lay out all the basic shaders, the basic assets and stuff. And so for now, we'll just tweak the bark. Bark in real life is generally not that shiny, it's not that specular. So let's actually increase the roughness pretty high. Let's give it a little bit of roughness in the diffuse. This will give it almost like a chalky kind of layer on top. And okay, that's a good base start. Now let's load up the normal. And so to do this, just start typing normal, and you'll get the RS normal map. Let's drop that down. And again, we'll click on this little file, and we should find the bark normal right here. Now all we got to do is plug that in to the Redshift, where is it? Bump. Coding overall. Advanced diffuse coating subsurface. Where is it at? Dispersion. Well, if I just drag it over here, it'll pop up more. Base properties. Metalness, IOR, weight, edge, color, roughness, multiple coating, subsurface, coating, transmittance. There we go. So under coding, bump input. So click that. And now it's plugged in. Let's reload the IPR. It's probably too weak to really show up, so let's play with the strength. So let's scale this, I don't know. Let's just go wild with 5, 15. Let's see what happens. 50. It's showing up, but it's really subtle. Let's flipping it. Nope. Huh. It's there, but it's just really, really weak. Which is fine. I mean, we don't need a crazy amount of normal. 200. This might actually start being too much. Stick with 200. I think that's good enough. Okay. And yeah, 200 I think is cool. Now let's tweak the I think it came out with a roughness map. Actually, I'm not 100% sure. So let's see if SpeedTree gave me a roughness map. So bark normal. Oh no. Okay, so it didn't actually spit out a roughness map for the bark. So I guess we'll just keep it like this. And so, okay, cool. We've got the bark pretty much laid in. And keep in mind, this is a medium quality asset, so it's not like something is going to be this close. When you're looking at it, it's meant, something pretty far away. And so, all right, next step. we need to start shading the leaves and the caps, and the caps are basically the ends of the tree. It's underneath all this stuff, but that's what a cap is. And so let's zoom in here. It's like a good amount of leaves. Okay, cool. So let's press the U key, bounce back out, and let's make a new material. So a redshift material builder. Drop that down. Give this a name. Rainbow gum leaf. Flag it on. Jump in. And we're going to make the sprite shader now. So the redshift sprite shader has to go between your material you're going to build, because this cuts out the material you're going to build. So we're going to feed this out to the surface, and we're going to make another redshift material. Drop this down, hit out color, and we're going to input it into the sprite shader. And so let's activate it onto our object, because right now it's not activated for the object. So let's go into object context, go to our gum tree, and under leaf, since we flagged it, it should pop up right here, rainbow gum leaf. Let's double click that. Let's go back to material context and go into our leaf shader. Okay, so now if we change the color here to whatever, it'll, as you can see, it'll change colors. So now what we need to do is we need to make the sprite cut out the leaf. So click on this. We look for the leaf alpha. Leaf alpha. Double click that. And if we zoom in here, the leaves are now cut out as we'd expect them to be in the shape of the leaf. And so now we just gotta put the leaf texture on. So let's again tab texture, RS texture, drop this down, wire this up, the out color to the diffuse, and let's load up the texture we need. So leaf JPEG, and now you can see that the zoom in here, the leaf texture is now mapped on correctly. Okay, cool. So let's load up another RS texture. This time we'll get the specular that we needed, and let's load up another texture. And oh wait, no, we actually are going to use a normal, and with the redshift normal, we'll load up the redshift gum leaf normal. Pipe this in to more, then into coding, bump input. Let's scale this to, I don't know, 200. Seems about right for the scale of the scene. And for our roughness, let's hit more, and pipe this into more. Base properties, specular, where's it at? Specular, reflection weight. And so, or actually reflection color. Or is it reflection weight? Let's try one or the other. Reflection weight. Hit the white key and you can just cut. So yeah, it looks like, let's adjust the reflection. No, I think it actually is the white. Let's or the color, I mean. So let's out color reflection color and make sure the weight's up. Zoom out a little. Okay, cool. And just to make sure, I'm actually going to check that file. Let's, where's it at? Yeah, so it's the specular color. It's not the roughness of the leaf, actually. Okay, so you could still tweak the roughness up and down. Let's give it a little bit of roughness. Because right now we're getting, I don't know if you can notice, but there's these little fireflies. And that's caused because it's way too specular right now. So let's give it a little roughness to break that up a bit. Okay, cool. So now let's look at it like we're facing the sun. And the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to make it thin and translucent. So we need to be able to see kind of what's going on. So underneath the diffuse settings on the material, we have backlighting, translucency, and weight. So if a good number usually for leaves is something between 0.3 and 0.5. So let's try 0.5. That's way too translucent. Let's but well, maybe it isn't. You know, you could one thing is right now the color that is being transmitted between the leaves is gray. So let's actually use the texture we already inputted for the base. So let's move these out of the way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the leaf texture, but we're going to pass it through a color correct node. So if we type in color, we'll see this color correct node. And so this color correct node basically lets you change the gamut, contrast, shift the hue, the saturation, stuff like that. So we're going to get our leaf texture. We're going to pipe it into more input on the color correct. And now we're going to use this and we'll shift the hue and drop the saturation a little bit. And maybe make the bottom of the leaves a little lighter. Right now it's not going to change anything because it's not plugged in, but let me plug it in. So out color, more, base properties, and where's it at? Reflection, 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 transmission, coding, overall color, opacity, transmittance thickness, roughness, coat thickness, base properties, diffuse roughness. Oh, here we go. Translucence color. And so we click that, and now, as you can see, it's kind of subtle right now, but you're starting to see the layering right here of the leaves because the light is passing through the layered leaves. And so what's cool now is we could tweak this to be a little different hue, or we can make it, you know, more saturated. And generally speaking, when light passes through a leaf or anything where you're simulating subsurface scattering, what happens is the other colors end up getting absorbed. And so what happens is the color that's actually being transmitted going through, the intensity of the color increases. It becomes more saturated, basically. That's why when you look at your hand in the light or something, you start seeing like those really nice, rich reds. That's because the blood in your hands is what's actually transmitting color, and so it becomes more pure, while the other colors that are passing through of the light basically get absorbed. And so, cool, we've got this going on. So now we've got some translucency on our leaf, and it's cut out. We've got the texture on there, and some roughness. So next step is the underside of these leaves are the same. So how do we make a double-sided leaf? So to do this, you got to use the ray switch node. So you type in ray, and you get the RS race switch. And so what we're going to do is basically we're going to move this to the side. Move a little bit over here. And this we could just move up here. We're not going to really mess with that. Or actually, we'll move this up and move this down. And so let's move all this out of the way. And so we've got the race switch node. And what the race switch node basically does is it lets Redshift know what to render when the camera's looking at it, what to render with the reflection, the refraction, the GI. Basically, what's reflected. Like, let's say you, I cover this actually in one of my free YouTube tutorials, and I'll link to it, but to go in depth if you're interested. But basically, to make a double-sided shader, you use the camera, and so you see this checkbox that says enable front and back. And so what you're doing is basically you're turning on the camera. Anything that the camera's seeing, it's going to have a front color and a back color. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our texture that we already made, and we're going to pipe that in to the front. So camera color. And now we're going to connect this out color to the diffuse slot. So what happens is now the front of the leaves is one color, and the back of the leaves is this gray color. If I turn it into red, you'll see. So, okay, cool. So now how can we use this to our advantage? We could, if you really wanted to get technical, you would build a new entire texture, because leaves, the backside of leaves is different. But for our purposes, this is going to be seen from far away. What we're going to do is just use another color correct, and we're going to now plug this in again, reuse that same texture, put it into the color correct node, and we're going to output it into the back side of the race switch. So camera, color back. And so now we've got the backside using the same texture, but now we're going to tweak it. So now we could shift the hue a little. See, now it's kind of like a bluish, a little reddish. Let's look for a yellow. So nice little yellow, a little yellow hue to it. We can desaturate it. We can increase the contrast. Let's try a little more contrast. And maybe we could saturate it to 2. It's a little too strong. Let's try 1.4. Cool. So now we've got double-sided leaves, and we're saving memory because we're using the same texture, but we're reusing it for different purposes. Okay, so let's zoom out. Let's look at this. And cool, now we're getting some layering of the leaves. See, you're getting the shadows, cutting through, stuff like that. Okay, cool. So now that we've got this shader ready, we got to now apply basically these techniques to the rest of the tree. So let's go back out. And one of the cool things about Houdini is we don't have to rebuild all this network again. I'm assuming that this object right here needs to get cut out, and it's going to use the sprite shader and all that stuff all over again. So let's just select our gum leaf that already had all this network laid out, and we're going to hold Alt and drag it down. And now we duplicated it. But this time we're going to use let's actually, I don't even know what that object actually is. Let me check the branches alpha. Okay, so whatever it's, I'm assuming it's these branches right here. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it's gonna be these. So let's just label this branches now. And we're going to go in here. And so the cool thing is now we've already got all the network laid out. I mean, we don't even have to do much. All we have to do now is Oh, and actually, let's apply it first to our object. So let's go to object level, go into our object, and under branches 10 and 2, let's I don't know if there's a difference, but let's just apply them. And branches 2, technically I could just delete this one since I'm going to apply the same shader actually. So if I delete this, oh great, I think we might have crashed. Oh no, okay. Got lucky. Let's save. Haven't saved yet actually. And let's wait a second. Should probably pause the IPR since it's been running this whole time. It's taking up resources. Okay, so we've got the branches, and what's cool is I can actually add 2 groups to this. So we've got branches 2 already here. All right, let's just delete these, and let's add branches 0, 2 and branches 10. And so both of these groups are going to point to rainbow gum branches. So let's jump to now our object, and let's fire up the IPR again. And so now the other objects, even though they shouldn't be using the leaf texture, they're using the leaf texture. So we're going to go into sprite. We're going to change that now, and we're going to use the branches alpha. And so now it's going to cut out as branch alphas. We're going to use, for our original texture, now we're going to switch it to the branches JPEG. And our normal map, we're going to change this over to the branches normal. And so, and I don't think it has branches. Oh, there actually is 2 different types of branches, so I'll actually delete one. And we don't have actually a specular map, so let's delete this. And we don't need a double-sided, so let's just delete that. And we'll do a color correct. And for this we'll just go back to 0, or actually no, we'll just keep it plain, so it's just the texture itself. And for the translucency, we probably shouldn't even have translucency since they're supposed to be branches, they're supposed to be solid, so let's delete that, and let's actually trim the node. And so basically all we're using for the branches now is the sprite, cutting out the material that's got a diffuse texture and a normal map. And so now let's actually turn off backlighting, so 0. And for the reflection, let's drop that down. Let's have some roughness, because it's bark, it's wood. Let's add a little bit of diffuse roughness, and that should be plenty. And so, okay, cool. Let's go back out, and let's actually go back to the object context, because let's slide this over. I actually should have just kept this with branches 0, 2. And let's add one more. I shouldn't have deleted it earlier. I made a mistake. And so number 5 actually needs to point to branches 10. And so okay, now we're back. So what's cool is, again, we're just going to duplicate this. Hold Alt, drag it down, boom. Now we're going to just write branches 10 for labeling purposes, and this is branches 2. And so let's go in here, and now we're going to change our sprite to the branches 10 alpha. We're going to change our texture to the branches 10 JPEG. And let's reload the IPR. And it's kind of weird. Why is it doing that? Let's see here. Let's go back to object level. What's going on? Branches 2 is pointing to branches 2. Oh, okay. Yeah, now we gotta connect it. That's why. So then now we look for branches 10, pipe that in, and boom. Now it's all together. So let's zoom out a little. Okay, cool. So the only thing missing now is the cap. And so let's now go back to our material context. Let's just duplicate this again. See, and that's how I made all of these. Way faster. You just duplicate, reuse node networks, and just change the textures and stuff like that. Saves you tons of time. I wish it was this easy to duplicate networks and it didn't take forever loading in other apps. Houdini is just amazing when it comes to a lot of stuff. But anyways, so since the cap is a solid object, it doesn't have an alpha, we're going to get rid of the sprite. So now we've got this, just the material. And we're going to connect the cap JPEG. So cap JPEG, turn that on. Cap normal. And since we already set the wood settings with the roughness and stuff, it should be fine. So let's zoom back out. Let's rename this as cap. And so now, and actually, let me make sure the exact name, cap06. Okay, so cap06. So now that we've got that and it's flagged and it's ready to go, we'll go to object level again, come into here, and find the cap group. Turn on, link it to cap, accept. Oh, what just happened? What just happened? Oh, God, oh, man. What just happened? I think I just made there we go. I think I made a relative reference, and wow, I went way too far back. Let's get back in there. Okay, where were we? Cap. Everything seems good, good, good. Okay. Yeah, I think I accidentally made a relative reference. So, okay. Cap. Yeah, see, a relative path. Okay, accept. Okay, cool. So now everything on our tree should be textured. Let's zoom out. It looks like it is. Cool. So let's zoom in a little bit more. See how it looks. And so cool. We got our leaves. Zoom in here. We've got all these leaves layered up. We've got variation with the back faces being slightly different colors. And there's more variety in the leaves rather than, using procedural nodes. You could add noises and stuff like that and go even further. And but I think just with color corrections, this is plenty of variety. And so cool. We've finished this tree. So okay. Let's go back up. Let's make this bounding box in our viewport. And let's zoom in a little bit and do a better render. So let's go to our redshift ROP, and let's do this to 0.05. Let's change our camera actually. Let's do HD 1080. And let's go back to our ROP and do a render to disk. Let's blow it up and see how it looks. So already looking pretty good. Zoom in here. Obviously there's little jaggies and stuff, and that's just because my render settings aren't made for final, but this is more for previewing. So okay, cool. Tree looks like it's good to go. Alright, cool. Let's just kill the render early. Move that out of the way. Okay, so basically now we just gotta follow these steps for all the other tree assets we have that needed shading. Alright, so now we're just gonna try to find a cool little camera angle and render out a little test image of our assets so far. And so to render this out, we're going to go to make sure our camera, actually let's do a cool camera resolution. So camera 1920 by 1080. Let's go a little higher than that. So let's do 4K, something pretty heavy. And yeah, that should be good. And let's go to our redshift ROP. Check out our settings. Let's do 0.003. Let's Mitchell. Let's do gauze. And let's see, for memory, automatic memory management. Set up brute force. Let's do brute force, radiance point cloud. Let's tweak the radiance point cloud, screen radius 8, samples per pixel 32. Our sampling overrides are 1024, 1024, 1024. That should be pretty good. And yeah, that should be pretty good all around. Okay, cool. So let's try out a good camera angle first, actually. So let's go back to the camera and let's try just 720p for now, so we can just find a nice little camera angle. So let's load up the IPR. Zoom in. It's going to extract all the objects. And again, once you proxy these, it's faster to do. I'll actually show you how to proxy them right now. Different render engines, I mean not render engines, different apps turn their assets into proxies differently. And in Houdini, the way you do it is basically you go to your out and your Redshift ROP, pin it down, and under main, I believe, oh no, Redshift, where's it at? IPR, render to disk, archive, IPR scripts, objects, memory, output, main, environment variables, archive. Okay, here we go. Under archive, you can check on export as Redshift file. And so basically what you do is you select what you want to export and you give it a name, pick a location to save it, and then you hit render, and it will build the proxy basically. And we're not going to do that right now since we're going to do a nice little render view. So let's actually move the camera around, see if we can get a cool angle. Something a little closer. Maybe over here. Let's go down a little. Maybe we should just go into this, see what we get. This is kind of cool, but let's go down a little. Maybe zoom out. Do this. Alright, let's just do this. Instead of waste our time moving around. Since this isn't even like a scene that with a good layout or anything, it's just rows of trees. And so, okay, cool, whatever. We'll just go with this. And no, let's zoom out a little more actually. I think we can get a little bit better composition. Let's pull up. Alright, cool. We'll do this. And, okay, so whatever. We like the angle. Let's tweak some things. So let's go to the Redshift ROP. Go to Redshift. Sampling. Yeah, that's cool. Global settings, SSS, volumetric scattering. We could do that. Maybe add some volume. That'll really bump up the render times though. Let's maybe throw on just a camera shader. So let's go to Object, Camera. Oh, unpin. Let's zoom back out. Redshift camera. Photographic exposure is turned on right now, so we could do several things with this. Let's add a little more vignette. Let's increase the allowed overexposure to 0.8. Let's just do a little more black crush. And maybe shift the white point. See what happens if we shift it just a tad. No, let's just keep it plain white. Let's do a little bit of depth of field. And let's increase the power. I don't know. 10. See what happens. Probably way too much, but no, guess not. Let's focal length 50. Let's focus distance. Let's try 10. It's hard to tell actually where we're at, so let's just increase the power to, like, I don't know, something crazy like 100. Still not enough. Let's try 1,000. Let's refresh the IPR. Something should be happening. Oh, don't crash. Let it cook and rebuild the scene. Okay. I don't know why they use Houdini. I guess the f-stop is really messing that up. And I don't want to bother tweaking the Houdini camera and stuff, so it's just easier to just do this. So let's try a focus distance of, I don't know, 50. Let's see where we focus at. Let's try 5. It's even worse. Let's try 100. 1,000. It's hard to tell. Let's try 1. Oh. Whoa. Okay, let's try 3. 25. Okay, now we're getting closer. So now we're focused in this stuff in the distance. Let's try 15. So now we're focusing this mid-ground stuff. Let's try 10. Let's try 13. Okay, cool. So let's decrease this something like 500. Let's increase the shutter blades to 5 to give us a bokeh pattern. Let's drop the power to 50. Let's decrease the circle of confusion to, let's try half, 0.5. This should bring more things into focus. Let's try 0.1. Let's try 0.01. Okay, this made everything basically come into focus. So let's try 0.05. Okay, cool. So now we've got foreground a little out of focus, stuff in the distance out of focus. Now let's tweak the let's actually increase the power. Let's try 100 again. So these are further out of focus. Let's try 1,000. See what happens. Might be too much. Or it might not even affect it too much. Yeah, let's just stick to 50. And let's change the focus distance. Let's try 15. So this looks pretty good. Actually, we could use a bokeh image, but we'll just use the built-in shutter. Okay, cool. So we've got this going on. Let's should we keep the background? We can maybe turn off the background. Let's go to the dome light, and where is it at? Enable background. Let's just turn that off. It's kind of distracting. Let's enable a backplate. Well, actually, I don't even think I got a backplate for that HDR, so never mind. that won't be useful. Let's just leave it on. If I had a backplate for this HDR, it'd probably be a good idea, but I don't, so we'll just skip that stage. All right, well, cool. We've got our shot ready. So let's pause this. Let's increase our resolution. Let's go to 1080p. 4K is probably going to take too long to render. And we're actually, yeah, no, 4K will take forever. Let's do a cool resolution gate though. Let's try 2500 by, yeah, let's try that. Let's see what we get. That's a nice wide screen kind of shot. 240 style. It's not actually 240. I didn't bother to do the math, but for people that don't know, 240 or 2.39 is considered a nice aspect ratio, and so it would normally be 1920 by 800 rather than 1080. But yeah, I mean, I didn't bother to do the math. But yeah, this looks cool. Okay, so let's kill the render and let's do our final render. Go to the Redshift ROP and let's go up, click render to disk. Let's blow it up. And let's do a full view. Oh. It's pretty big. So let it generate the radiance point cloud. Might give it a minute, since this might take a little while. It's pretty high res. The samples aren't huge. I probably need more to get rid of the depth of field, but the depth of field noise, but whatever. As you can see, because I chose 5 blades, the depth of field bokeh is pentagon shaped, 5 blades. And yeah, I definitely for this heavy of a depth of field, I would have to crank out the settings way higher than what I have them at. This is way too low. But you know, it's rendering pretty quick, so we'll see how it looks in a little bit. I also think the depth of field power is way too high. That's why we're getting the obvious pentagon shapes. So I probably would need to drop that down a bit. But I just want to make sure the area in focus is actually looking good. And I think it is from the looks of it. But let's just see where it goes. Because yeah, the depth of field is way too strong. And I think the circle of confusion, the COC, is way too strong also, so that's why you're getting these obvious bokeh shapes where they should be more subtle. A lot more subtle. But, you know, these things you can't really notice in the IPR too well, so it's usually a good idea to start doing final render tests to catch little details like that. But yeah, I mean, the areas that should be in focus are looking good. So let's kill the render. Let's just kill it. And let's go back to the camera, redshift camera, and let's tweak the depth of field. So let's go with a power of like 5, or not even. Let's try 2. Power of 2. Let's see what happens. Give that a shot. Oh, let's see. Go to my ROP. And render to disk. And actually at this time, probably a good idea to save in case anything goes wrong. I don't want to lose the work that I've been doing. It's okay. Building the redshift scene. Depth of field looks a little less strong. Might still be too strong actually, but kind of hard to tell right now during the point cloud phase. looks okay, but let's see. Oh yeah, much better. A lot more subtle. Still a little strong, but yeah, it's still strong. So let's kill it already. Go back to the camera. And power of, let's try 0.5 even. And let's drop the circle of confusion to 0.3, 0.2, 0.3. So more of the scene's a little more in focus. And let's go back to the redshift ROP, render to disk, and see what we get. Something to keep in mind, you want subtleties. You don't want your depth of field to be just like crazy, unless you want like that macro, micro kind of shot. But for most purposes, you don't want your depth of field to be obvious, super crazy. You want things to be subtle. Like a big problem is a lot of people use chromatic aberration all over the image because they do it in post in Photoshop, for example. And what happens is you get chromatic aberration everywhere. But in real life, you don't get chromatic aberration on everything through that you're shooting through the lens. You actually only get chromatic aberration in places that are out of focus, and that's what causes the chromatic aberration. And to do that in Redshift, all you have to do is use a chromatic aberration bokeh, and it'll just give you that little subtle chromatic aberration in proper spots. So now this is looking way better. Yeah, much better. So nice depth of field, not too noisy. And then we've got this object back here. It's sharper. Yeah, this is way better. It was way too strong earlier. But, you know, that's how you figure out your values. Basically, you got to go crazy. You got to go tiny and you got to go huge, and then you see how strong it is, and you work your way, you know, in big increments all the way until you start doing smaller increments. And that's how you figure out a nice depth of field. And you know, the same thing would happen if you were doing volumetric haze. You start out with big numbers and see what happens with your lights, stuff like that. And eventually what you want to do is just narrow it down until you have a nice subtle changes that influence the look. And so once this is done rendering, I'm going to just save it out as a Pixar 24 compressed EXR, because there's different EXR formats. A lot of people don't know this, but typically most people use zip scanline, which can be huge, makes massive files, and that's the older EXR formats. Redshift luckily can save out two of the newer cool compressed formats that actually save tons of space, but the quality's still really good. And those two formats are the DreamWorks format, DWA, and DWAB and DWAA. And there's also the Pixar 24 format. And they basically compress your EXR, but it still has pretty good quality. If you're going to need it for deep image rendering and stuff like that, it's lossy at 32-bit. Those two formats, so you don't want to render deep or Z depth, stuff like that, data channels, data EXR channels, because you want that 32-bit float quality. But this is just going to be an image, so saving it as a Pixar 24 won't matter. And okay, cool, it's coming along. I actually should have checked. Oh, I knew it. I should have turned on the dome light alpha, but too late. That way we wouldn't have the background in the alpha. We could cut it out and replace it in Photoshop with something else. But whatever. And yeah, it's looking good. tons of little leaves, and we got translucencies and specular on certain leaves. We've got the depth of field going, all that stuff. And so once this is done rendering, I'm going to just save this out as a Pixar 24 EXR, take it into Photoshop, tweak it, tweak the using the HDR controls. And since this is a 32-bit file, you could do all types of crazy tweaking since you have all the data there. You have the super dark darks all the way up to the light lights. And yeah, so far only 4 minutes and 58 seconds, and this is 2,500 by something res, depth of field, lots of little geometry, translucency, all that stuff, and it's clean. So all right, cool. So let's save this out. Save frame as. Let's go to my desktop. Let's just call this Patreon image 1.exr, and it'll switch to the EXR format. And so for compression, let's go with Pixar 24, PXR 24. Cool. All right. And yeah, it looks good. And I don't have any LUTs activated or anything like that. You could turn on your own LUTs and burn them in. I'm not using any LUTs. This is just plain generic sRGB. I probably should have been using ACES and stuff like that, but that some people wouldn't know how to figure that out and how to work, and that require an entirely different tutorial also. So okay, cool. Let's move that out of the way. And now that we've got the EXR file, let's load Photoshop up. Let that load. And a cool plugin I recommend people use for EXR files is EXR.io. It's free. It's really useful since it can read and write proper EXR formats. And okay, cool. Let's go to image, adjustments, HDR toning. Yes, we'll flatten. And so with this, you could get crazy. You could tweak pretty much anything. So let's get some crunch the darks in. Let's pull that up a little. Let's pull this back. So if we want to bring the highlights in more, we could do that. Obviously, that's way too much. Do edge glow, strength. You could tweak the details, the shadow strength, so you could move the shadow down or up. Right now, the shadow's kind of already there. Increase the highlight. Increase saturation or desaturate. Tweak the vibrance a little. Cool. Now we've got this cinematic looking LUT. And yeah, but that's basically it, And you could save, like I said, I'll save these out as proxy assets. That's actually what I'm going to end up doing. and we're going to be using these to scatter on an environment, and I'll be covering that in another tutorial. Alright guys, thanks again for all the support, and next tutorial we'll probably be covering the terrain that we're going to scatter trees on, and so we'll cover building the terrain using Houdini's terrain tools. Alright, thanks guys.